On a cold December evening, the city lights glowed softly across the crowded streets. People hurried past one another, wrapped in thick coats and scarves, rushing to get home before the winter wind grew sharper. Among them sat a young homeless boy near the corner of a busy road. He had no warm coat and no bag to carry. All he had was an old wooden crate beside him, worn down from years of use. But for him, that little crate was more than just a leftover piece of wood. It was his imaginary piano. The boy sat close to the wall, trying to protect himself from the cold air. His fingers were thin from hunger and chilly weather, but he still tapped gently on the crate as if he was playing a delicate tune. The sounds weren't loud, but the rhythm he tapped had a sense of calmness, like something beautiful trapped inside simple actions. His humming followed the tapping, soft and steady, as if he knew the exact notes of a song only he could hear. People walked by without noticing him. Some were too busy, some too tired, and some simply didn't see him sitting there. A few glanced at him for a moment, but then continued walking, their footsteps echoing across the street. The boy didn't mind much. He was used to being invisible. Still, whenever someone slowed down or turned their head, he hoped they might hear the tune he imagined so clearly. He had always loved music, even when he had nothing else, not even a proper place to sleep. He carried music in his heart. Long ago, when life was different, he had once seen a real piano. He remembered how the keys looked, the shine on them, and the warm sound they made when someone touched them carefully. That memory stayed with him, even when everything else was taken away. Tonight, as snowflakes started falling from the sky, the boy closed his eyes and imagined himself sitting in front of a real piano again. His fingers moved across the wooden crate, trying to follow the melody in his mind. He didn't know if anyone could hear it, but he played anyway, because it made him feel like he still had something of his own. A group of people passed him, chatting loudly about their holiday shopping. One of them paused for a second, listening to the boy's tapping, but then shrugged it off and continued walking. The boy opened his eyes and smiled faintly. Even if they didn't hear the music the way he felt it, he knew the tune was real to him. The wind grew stronger, pushing bits of snow across the pavement. The boy rubbed his hands together to warm them, then went back to tapping his rhythm. His breath formed a mist in the cold air, rising and disappearing just as quickly. He wished he had gloves, or at least something warm to wrap around himself, but he had learned not to waste time wishing for things he couldn't have. A few moments later, a shiny black car stopped near the traffic light. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out. He wore an expensive coat, polished shoes, and a watch that sparkled even in the dim light. People in the area recognized him. He was well known for his money, but also well known for his sharp tongue. He didn't have much patience for anyone who looked poor or slow. The man's eyes narrowed when he noticed the boy sitting by the wall. His attention wandered for a moment as he listened to the tapping sound. The boy didn't look up right away. He was too focused on the melody in his mind. But when the tapping slowed, he sensed someone standing nearby and lifted his head. The man raised his eyebrows and scoffed. "What's this supposed to be? Some kind of performance?" His voice was loud enough for others walking by to hear. A couple of people slowed down, curious about what he was talking about. The boy didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure what to say. He simply looked at the crate and gently tapped it again, as if trying to show that he was not doing anything wrong. He wasn't asking for money or attention. He was just passing time in the only way that brought him peace. But the man laughed, shaking his head. "You think you're playing real music? This isn't a stage. You're not impressing anyone." He motioned toward the passing crowd, hoping to get more laughs. A few people nearby chuckled at the man's comment, not because they were cruel, but because they didn't understand what the boy was trying to do. They only saw a homeless child tapping on a piece of wood. They didn't know that behind those small motions was a heart full of music. The boy kept his face calm, though a small ache tugged at him inside. He had heard comments like this many times before, and he had learned not to cry or look hurt. Instead, he simply nodded once and continued tapping slowly, letting the tune carry him away from the noise around him. The man rolled his eyes and started to walk off. "Kids these days," he muttered. No sense of reality. He didn't bother to look back or notice that the boy kept playing with the same gentle dedication. As the rich man walked away, the boy's tapping softened into a different rhythm, almost like a sad echo. But after a minute, he found his melody again. Music never left him for long. Even when people mocked him, it stayed like a friend beside him. The street continued to buzz with movement, with cars honking and people talking and vendors closing their stalls for the night. The boy remained in his little corner, tapping quietly as snow continued to fall around him. Each snowflake sparkled for a second before melting near the warmth of his breath. During quieter moments, a few strangers glanced in his direction again. Some noticed the steady rhythm in his tapping, and for a second, their expressions softened. Maybe they didn't fully understand, but they sensed something calm and comforting in the way he moved his fingers. The boy kept humming the tune in his mind, letting the small notes drift into the cold evening air. Even though no one asked who he was or where he came from, he felt that as long as he had music, he still had something to hold on to. Music made him feel alive. It reminded him that he was more than his situation. As the night grew deeper, the street began to empty. The boy shivered, rubbing his arms to stay warm. But before closing his eyes to rest, he tapped the crate one more time slow. Soft notes shaped by his imagination. The invisible piano in his mind glowed brighter than anything around him. He didn't know that this simple moment, this quiet corner, and this small act of tapping would soon change everything. Someone would notice. Someone would listen. And the tune that he carried within him would not stay hidden forever. For now, though, he sat alone in the cold, unaware that life had already started moving him toward a future he could never have imagined. The morning came slowly, with the pale sun fighting its way through the winter clouds. The boy woke up shivering, pulling his thin jacket tighter around himself. The cold from the night still clung to his skin, but he tried not to think about it. He rubbed his hands together and breathed into them for warmth, then reached for the old wooden crate beside him. Even before standing up, he gently tapped a small rhythm on it. As if greeting an old friend, people started filling the streets again. Shopkeepers unlocked their doors, delivery trucks arrived, and the sound of the city returned. The boy quietly observed everything from his corner. He wasn't sure where he would go today, but he knew one thing: music would follow him wherever he walked. He picked up the crate and wandered toward a busier area. His steps were small and careful, avoiding the icy patches on the pavement. Some people glanced at him, but most continued with their day, unaware of the beautiful melodies that lived inside his mind. By noon, the boy reached the open area near the shopping center. A large Christmas tree stood in the middle, decorated with lights and ornaments that sparkled whenever the breeze moved them. Around the tree, many workers were busy setting up a small stage. They carried speakers, ranged chairs, and tested microphones. Music played from a speaker as the team prepared for a charity event scheduled later that evening. The boy stood at the edge of the crowd, hugging his crate close to his chest. He watched the workers with wide eyes, especially when he saw a small keyboard sitting on the stage. It wasn't a grand piano, but it was real. It wasn't in his imagination, it was something he could touch. He felt his heart move faster. He didn't dare step closer, though. He stayed where he was, tapping lightly on his crate as the workers tested the microphones. One of the volunteers, a woman holding a stack of papers, walked past and heard a soft tapping sound. She slowed down, looking around to find where it was coming from. Her eyes landed on the boy. She watched him for a moment, noticing how steady and precise his tapping was, almost like he was following the music playing from the speakers. The song coming from the speaker was a popular Christmas tune, and the boy matched every beat perfectly without even trying. The volunteer found herself smiling in surprise. She had seen many children tapping or clapping along to music, but the boy's rhythm was different. It was careful, thoughtful, almost professional. She walked toward him slowly, not wanting to frighten him. "Hi there," she said gently. "You like music?" The boy looked up, unsure if he should answer. He nodded softly. "I noticed you tapping," she continued. "You have good timing." "Very good." The boy didn't know how to respond, so he just looked down at his crate. The woman followed his gaze and understood. The crate wasn't just a piece of wood. It was the closest thing he had to an instrument. She looked back at the stage and then at him. "Would you like to come closer? We're just setting up. No one will mind." The boy hesitated. People usually ignored him or told him to stay away from crowded places. He wasn't sure if he was allowed. Seeing his hesitation, the woman gave him a warm smile. "It's okay. You're welcome here. Just for a little while." The boy slowly stood and stepped forward, clutching the crate nervously. Each step felt heavy, as though he might be stopped at any moment. But no one looked at him with annoyance. The workers were too busy with their tasks to pay attention. When he reached the edge of the stage, his eyes went straight to the keyboard. His hands tingled just from seeing it up close. It wasn't a fancy instrument, but to him, it looked like magic. The woman noticed the way he stared at it. "Would you like to try it?" she asked softly. The boy's heart skipped a beat. He pointed at the keyboard with uncertainty, as if asking if she truly meant it. Yes, she said encouragingly. Go ahead. Play something if you want. The boy placed his crate down carefully and approached the keyboard. His fingers were trembling, partly from the cold and partly from excitement. He lifted his hands slowly, afraid to touch the keys too soon. For a moment, he just stood there, breathing deeply as he remembered the last time he touched a piano. Then, with a gentle push, his fingers pressed down on the keys. The sound that came out wasn't random, it wasn't hesitant, it was clear, warm, and carried the feeling of Christmas. The workers nearby stopped what they were doing. One of the sound technicians turned toward the stage, confused at hearing such a beautiful melody when no one was supposed to be performing. The boy played slowly at first, testing the feel of the keys, but within seconds, he relaxed as the music filled him completely. His fingers moved with surprising ease, gliding from one note to another as if he had practiced for years. The simple keyboard seemed to come alive under his touch. The volunteer stood back, amazed. She watched the boy's face change as he played, first nervous, then calm, then completely lost in the music. It was as if the cold weather, the hunger, the loneliness, everything faded when he touched those keys. A few workers gathered around quietly, trying not to interrupt. One of them pulled out a phone and began recording. They didn't know who the boy was, but they knew what they were hearing wasn't ordinary. His hands moved with the natural grace of someone who understood music deeply without needing lessons. When the boy finished the melody, there was a brief moment where the air felt still. No one clapped, not because they didn't appreciate it, but because they were too surprised to react immediately. Then the volunteer stepped closer. That was amazing, she said softly. Where did you learn to play like that? The boy shrugged shyly. I just remember things, he whispered. She knelt beside him. You have a gift, a real one. The boy looked down, unsure how to accept such words. He had never heard anyone say that to him before. The worker holding the phone approached them. We should show this to the organizers, he whispered to the volunteer. They need to see this kid. The volunteer nodded. She didn't want to scare the boy, so she spoke calmly. Some people are planning a big event here tonight. I think they'll want to hear your music. The boy blinked in confusion. Me? Yes, she said with a smile. You? He didn't know what to say. For the first time in a long while, someone wasn't ignoring him. Someone wasn't mocking him. Someone actually believed he had something valuable to offer. The feeling filled his chest with a warm glow he almost didn't recognize. The volunteer asked gently, would you like to come back later, around evening? The boy hesitated. Evening was when the streets got colder and lonelier for him. He usually looked for shelter before it got dark, but the thought of playing again, the thought of touching real keys, it was too hard to refuse. He nodded slowly. That's great, she said. We'll be here, and we'll make sure no one bothers you. The boy stepped back from the keyboard, still amazed by the sound he had created. It felt like a dream he didn't want to wake from. Before leaving, he touched the keys one last time, letting a soft note echo gently in the air. He picked up his crate and held it close, as if it had helped guide him to this moment. As he walked away, the volunteer and the workers watched him go. None of them knew his name or where he came from, but they felt certain about one thing: the boy had a special gift, something that shouldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, the workers sent the video to the event organizers. He didn't realize that one of the main donors of the charity, the same wealthy man who mocked the boy earlier, would soon see it. And when he did, everything would take a direction no one expected. The afternoon slowly faded into early evening, and the city lights began to glow across the streets once again. People hurried toward the shopping center for the charity event, carrying warm drinks and wearing bright scarves. Laughter echoed through the air, mixed with soft holiday music coming from the speakers. The whole place felt alive, warm, and full of excitement. But far down the sidewalk, away from the bright decorations and the cheerful crowd, the boy stood quietly with his crate held against his chest. He had been thinking about the invitation the entire day. Part of him felt excited, but another part felt nervous. He had never been invited anywhere before. No one had ever asked him to come back for anything, especially not to play music. The idea felt unreal, like something from a dream. He wasn't sure if he truly belonged there, but something inside him pushed him to try. Even if he was scared, he knew he couldn't ignore the chance to play again. The closer he walked to the shopping center, the louder the music grew. People were chatting, eating small pastries, and taking pictures near the big Christmas tree. The stage was lit up with warm yellow lights, and volunteers moved around checking everything for the evening program. The boy's steps slowed when he saw how busy and bright the place was now. He felt smaller than usual, like he might disappear between the moving crowd. But he remembered the volunteer's smile, the gentle way she encouraged him, and the feeling of the keyboard beneath his fingers. That memory gave him the courage to step closer. As he approached the stage, the same volunteer noticed him. She brightened instantly and hurried over. "You came back," she said warmly. The boy nodded, hugging his crate a little tighter. "I'm glad you're here," she said. "Come on, let's go to the back area. It's quieter there." She guided him behind the stage where the noise was softer and the lights less bright. A few workers recognized him from earlier and gave small nods of approval. The volunteer handed him a cup of warm tea. "Drink slowly," she advised. "It's hot." The boy wrapped his hands around the cup, feeling the heat seep into his fingers. It felt strange to hold something warm. For a moment, he simply closed his eyes and breathed in the rising steam. One of the sound technicians approached. "So this is the kid," he whispered to the volunteer. "Yes," she replied. "He's the one from the video." The technician looked at the boy with curiosity. "He's got some serious talent." The organizers were stunned when they saw the recording. The boy looked up. "They watched it." "They sure did," the technician said. "They want to meet you." The boy's heart thumped harder. He wasn't used to attention. He wasn't used to people knowing anything about him. It almost felt like too much. But he tried to stay calm. Just then, a man with a clipboard approached, one of the main coordinators of the event. He studied the boy for a moment, not unkindly, but with deep curiosity. "So you're the young musician everyone is talking about?" The boy looked down, unsure if he should speak. "It's okay," the coordinator said gently. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, but I want you to know you impressed a lot of people today." The boy shifted slightly, unsure how to take such words. "We have many performances tonight," the coordinator continued, "but we'd like you to play one short song. Nothing long, just a small piece. The crowd would love it." The boy hesitated. "In front of everyone?" he whispered. "Yes," the coordinator said. "If you want. Only if you want." The boy felt his stomach twist at the idea of performing in front of so many people. He had never played for anyone before, not really. Only the street, the wind, and sometimes a few curious strangers had heard him. But something inside him even stronger than fear told him to try. He nodded slowly. A look of relief crossed the coordinator's face. "Good, we'll call you when it's time. For now, stay warm and relaxed." The boy sat near a stack of stage equipment, sipping his tea and tapping soft rhythms on his crate. His tapping wasn't loud, but the volunteer heard it and recognized the calmness in it. She smiled quietly, knowing the boy was preparing himself. Meanwhile, inside the preparation tent, something unexpected happened. A group of organizers, reviewing the event schedule, gathered around a tablet. The video of the boy's earlier performance played again. His small hands dancing over the keyboard filled the tent with a soft, enchanting melody. Standing among them was the wealthy donor, the same man who had mocked the boy earlier that morning. He was discussing financial contributions when he heard the music coming from the tablet. His words stopped mid-sentence. He turned toward the screen, drawn by the melody. "Who is that?" he asked, confused by how clean and expressive the notes sounded. "A boy," one of the organizers replied. "He played this during setup today. He's supposed to perform tonight." The man frowned, stepping closer to see the screen properly. And then he froze. There on the screen was the same boy he had mocked, the same child he had laughed at for tapping on a wooden crate. Except now, the boy wasn't tapping. He was playing real music, beautiful, natural, and surprisingly skilled. The donor's eyes widened slightly. "That's him." "Yes," the organizer said. "He has incredible talent. Hard to believe he learned without training." The man didn't respond for a long moment. He felt an uncomfortable twist inside his chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't annoyance. It was something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Guilt. He had judged the boy without knowing him. He had mocked him without understanding the story behind those small tapping sounds. Now, watching the boy play with such emotion, the man felt something heavy settle over him. He walked out of the tent without another word outside. He looked around until he spotted the boy sitting beside the volunteer. The child looked small, thin, quiet, nothing like the confident player in the video. The man felt a sting of shame hit him. He approached slowly. The boy noticed him and stiffened, gripping the crate tightly. He recognized the man immediately. The volunteer stood protectively between them, but the man raised a hand gently. "I just want to talk." The boy's eyes lowered. The man took a breath. He wasn't used to apologizing. He wasn't good at it. But he tried anyway. I saw the video, he said quietly. That was impressive. Very impressive. The boy didn't answer. I'm sorry. The man continued. The words felt heavy and unfamiliar in his mouth. This morning, I shouldn't have laughed. I didn't understand. The boy still didn't speak, but the stiffness in his posture softened just a little. I hope you'll accept my apology, the man said, sounding more genuine than anyone expected. The boy looked up slowly. His eyes were unsure, but not angry. He gave a small nod. The man exhaled, relieved. Thank you, he said softly. The volunteer watched the interaction with surprise. She didn't know what had happened earlier, but she could see it mattered now. Just then, one of the stage workers called out, "It's time. He's up next." The boy's heart jumped. He placed his crate down carefully as the volunteer guided him toward the stage entrance. The donor followed cautiously, staying a few steps behind. He felt nervous, strangely emotional. He didn't know why he cared so much, but something about the boy's quiet determination had touched him. The coordinator met them at the side of the stage. "Are you ready?" he asked. The boy swallowed hard and nodded. The crowd was large, much larger than he expected. Dozens of people sat in chairs while many others stood around holding cups of warm drinks. The lights were bright, the microphone set, and the keyboard waited in the middle of the stage. The boy took a deep breath. He stepped forward. The volunteer whispered, "Just play from your heart." "That's enough." He nodded and walked toward the keyboard. His fingers trembled, but not from cold this time, from the weight of the moment. He sat down slowly, taking a second to steady his breath, and then, with gentle courage, he lifted his hands toward the keys. The crowd quieted. The lights warmed the stage. The boy touched the keys. And the first soft note drifted across the winter air. No one knew yet what that small moment would mean, but soon, the entire crowd would fall silent, and the boy's music would touch every heart listening. She woke up earlier than usual the next morning, long before the sun began to rise. The room was still dark, but her mind was already awake, pulled from sleep by a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She lay there for a moment, listening to the faint sounds of the world outside, trying to steady her breathing. Today would not be an ordinary day. Today was the day everything could change. She sat up slowly and rubbed her hands together, trying to warm them. The cold always made her fingers stiff, and she needed them loose, ready, and confident. A quiet smile touched her face as she whispered a small promise to herself. She would give her best, no matter what happened. She would not let fear guide her steps. The first faint light began to appear through the window, turning the sky outside a soft gray. She stood up and walked to the small wooden table in the corner of the room. On it lay a folded cloth she always used to keep dust off the old keyboard. She practiced on every night. She lifted the cloth gently and placed it aside, letting her fingertips glide across the keys. Even though it was old and some notes sounded a little dull, it had been her companion for years. She pressed one key, just lightly enough to hear a soft sound. It was warm, familiar, and it reminded her of why she kept going even when things got hard. Music made her feel alive in a way nothing else did. It made her forget her worries, her past, and all the things. The news about the boy's music reached the charity organizers faster than anyone expected. The short video, recorded on a simple phone, was shared from one volunteer to another until it finally reached the people preparing for the Christmas event. They were busy planning the stage, the decorations, and the evening performances, but everything paused when they watched the clip. The boy's hands moved gently over the small keyboard, his fingers finding every note with such ease that it surprised everyone who saw it. His tune was warm, calm, and full of emotion, the kind of sound that made people stop whatever they were doing for a moment. No one expected a child from the street to play like that. One of the organizers immediately called the volunteer who had found the boy. She explained everything: how he copied melodies without being taught, how he played naturally, and how he didn't ask for anything in return. He just loved music. The organizers were touched and decided to invite him to perform one Christmas song on stage. It wasn't a big role, but they believed his music would add heart to the event. Meanwhile, the main donor of the event, the same wealthy man who had mocked the boy days earlier, was going through his emails when he noticed the same video attached to the event updates. At first, he clicked it casually, expecting just another clip from the preparation team. But the moment the boy's music filled the room, he froze. His eyes widened, recognizing the child instantly. It was the same boy he had made fun of, the same boy he had brushed aside as if he meant nothing. A strange feeling came over him, something between guilt and disbelief. He replayed the video, listening carefully. The tune wasn't random or childish. It was clean, soft, and meaningful. Each note carried something special. He sat back in his chair, feeling a sting in his chest as he realized how wrong his first impression had been. He had judged the boy too quickly, assuming his tapping on the crate was nothing more than noise. The organizers later called him to confirm his attendance at the Christmas event. He told them he would come early and wanted to meet the boy before the performance. They agreed, though they were surprised at his sudden interest. On the morning of the event, the boy arrived at the venue with the volunteer who had helped him. He looked nervous but excited. It was the first time he had been inside a warm and decorated hall, filled with lights and music. People were busy setting things up, but many stopped to greet him gently. Remembering the video they had seen, they didn't treat him like a stranger. They treated him like someone who mattered. A soft red sweater was given to him by one of the organizers to help him stay warm on stage. He looked at it with a shy smile, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Care. The keyboard he was supposed to use for practice was placed at the corner of the hall. When he sat down and played a few notes, the sound echoed beautifully. Round noon, the wealthy man arrived. He walked inside with his usual confident steps. But something about him was different today. He wasn't in a rush. He wasn't complaining. He actually looked nervous. When he saw the boy across the hall, sitting at the keyboard, his heart sank. He had expected the child to be good, but hearing it live was different. The boy played with such peace, unaware of who was watching. The man approached slowly. When the boy noticed him, he froze for a moment. He remembered the man's voice, the laughter, the comments that made him feel small. His hands stopped moving, and he looked down at the keys. The man cleared his throat softly. I'm sorry, he said quietly. His voice didn't sound like the voice from the street. It carried sincerity now. I didn't know you could play like that. I shouldn't have judged you. I was wrong. The boy didn't say anything at first. He just stared at the keys, trying to understand what was happening. No one had ever apologized to him before. The man went on. Your music, it's special. You're special. I hope you can forgive me. The room fell silent around them. A few volunteers watched from a distance, surprised by the man's humility. The boy finally lifted his head and gave a small nod. It wasn't a big gesture, but it was enough. Will you play tonight? The man asked gently. The boy nodded again. The man smiled lightly, stepped back, and allowed him to continue practicing. For the first time, he didn't see a homeless child. He saw a young talent with a gift that deserved to be heard. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly. The boy practiced quietly, trying different melodies, getting comfortable with the instrument. People brought him warm food, offered him encouraging words, and made sure he didn't feel alone. Every small act of kindness made him feel more confident. As the sun began to set, the hall filled with families, children, and local visitors excited for the Christmas event. The decorations glowed softly, the stage lights warmed the room, and the sound of soft holiday music floated in the air. The boy stayed backstage, waiting for his turn, holding the edges of his sweater nervously. The wealthy man stood near the front row, watching the stage. He felt anxious in a way he hadn't felt in years. He hoped the boy would shine. He hoped the crowd would feel what he felt when he heard that melody. The host finally stepped up to the microphone and announced the boy's performance. The audience turned their heads, curious. Some had heard rumors about him. Some came only for the holiday show. None of them knew what they were about to witness. The boy stepped onto the stage, his small steps echoing lightly. The hall fell quiet. He sat down at the piano, his hands trembling for a moment. But when he pressed the first key, something inside him settled. Music had always been his safe place. What happened next would surprise everyone, even the wealthy man who thought he had already understood the boy's gift. The hall was silent the moment the boy's fingers touched the keys. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It was filled with attention, curiosity, and a quiet hope from everyone watching. He took a slow breath, trying to calm the nervous shaking in his hands. The lights felt a little too bright, and the crowd felt a little too big. But once he pressed the second note, something inside him settled. The piano responded softly, as if welcoming him. His melody began gentle, almost like a whisper, as if he was telling the instrument a secret. The people in the audience leaned forward instinctively, wanting to catch every sound. The boy didn't look at the crowd. He kept his eyes on the keys. letting his heart guide him the same way it always did when he played alone on the street. But this time, the music felt different. It felt warm. It felt safe. He played a simple Christmas tune, but he played it in his own way. He added tiny touches, soft changes, and little turns in the melody that made the familiar song feel new. It carried the feeling of cold nights he had spent outside, the sound of his humming on empty streets, the hope he kept alive even when everything around him felt heavy. Every note seemed to tell a part of his story. People in the audience felt it. They couldn't explain it. But the moment the music grew stronger, something inside them shifted. A few wiped their eyes without even knowing why. Others stared, stunned by how a child with no training could express so much emotion with a simple keyboard. The wealthy man who had mocked him earlier watched with a tight chest. He had seen many performances in his life, from big shows to celebrated artists. But nothing had made him feel the way this boy's music did now. He realized that talent didn't always come from lessons or expensive instruments. Sometimes it came from pain, hope, and a heart that refused to give up. As the song grew, the boy's confidence grew too. His fingers moved faster, lighter, more formless, almost dancing on the keys. He no longer felt the weight of the crowd. He no longer thought about the cold streets waiting outside the hall. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged somewhere. When the final note eased into silence, the hall stayed still for a moment, almost unsure if it was allowed to breathe again. Then a wave of applause rose suddenly, loud and warm, filling the entire place. People stood up, clapping harder with each second, cheering for him the way they would cheer for a star. The boy blinked in surprise. He wasn't used to people paying attention to him. He wasn't used to being celebrated. A small smile formed on his face, shy but full of gratitude. Backstage volunteers rushed forward to hug him gently, careful not to overwhelm him. They praised him, telling him how wonderfully he had played. Someone brought him warm cocoa. Someone else wrapped a scarf around his shoulders. And for the first time, he felt surrounded by kindness. The wealthy man walked onto the stage after the crowd calmed down. His steps were slow, as if he didn't want to disturb the moment. When he reached the boy, he didn't speak at first. He just looked at him with a soft, humble expression. "You changed the whole night," the man finally said, his voice low but sincere. "You touched everyone here, and you reminded me of something I had forgotten, that real talent can come from anyone, anywhere." The boy looked down, unsure how to respond. Compliments were new to him. He didn't know how to accept them. The man gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "If you allow me," he continued, "I'd like to help you. Not because I feel sorry for you, but because you deserve a chance to grow. Your gift is real, and I want to support it." The boy lifted his eyes slowly. There was confusion in them, but also hope. He whispered a small, quiet, "Thank you." It wasn't much, but it was enough. After the event ended, the organizers and the wealthy man sat together to discuss how they could help him. They made plans to enroll him in music classes, to give him a safe place to stay, and to make sure he never had to sleep on cold streets again. They didn't see him as charity. They saw him as a rising musician. The boy didn't know how to feel at first. His life had changed in just a few days. He had gone from being ignored on street corners to being the center of a celebration. It felt unreal, like a dream he wasn't sure he was allowed to have. But the kindness he received made him believe that maybe his future could be different after all. Over the next few months, everything slowly improved. He attended lessons where he learned more about music. His teachers were amazed by how quickly he understood everything. They said he had something that could not be taught, a natural ability that only a few people carry inside them. He practiced every day, sometimes playing songs he learned in class, other times creating his own melodies. The wealthy man often visited to check on his progress. He didn't act distant or proud anymore. He acted like someone who genuinely cared. People at the event continued talking about the boy for weeks. Many asked the organizers about him, wanting to know how they could help or support him. His story spread quietly through the community, inspiring others to look at children on the streets differently. One evening, months later, the boy sat in front of a grand piano at a small indoor concert arranged just for young musicians. The room wasn't big, and the audience wasn't huge, but this time, he wasn't nervous. He played confidently, filling the room with warm sound. When he finished, the applause came again, strong and full of admiration. The wealthy man sat in the front row, smiling proudly. After the performance, he went up to the boy and said, "You're no longer the child playing on a crate outside. You're a real musician now." The boy looked at the piano, then back at the man, and smiled softly. "I always wanted to play," he said. "I just didn't have a chance, and now you do." The man replied, "And you'll have many more." The boy believed him. As he walked off the stage that night, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope for tomorrow, confidence in himself, and gratitude for the people who chose to see his potential instead of judging his appearance. His journey wasn't easy, and his life wasn't suddenly perfect, but he was no longer alone. He had support, warmth, opportunity, and a future he could look forward to. And every time he played, he remembered the cold nights, the crate on the street, and the moment a simple Christmas song changed everything. His music had brought him into the light, and he carried that light with him, ready to share it with the world.